Chapter 9. "What is it?" murmured Bethany. It was still dark, the sun barely making its presence known. Drew had turned on the side lamp.
"I thought I heard the door,"
Drew told her quietly. He flipped back the covers and went to have a look. The chain was off, the deadbolt undone, but the regular lock was secure.
"Did you lock this properly last night?"
"Yes." Bethany grabbed her robe, putting it on as she padded toward Drew. "I double-checked it."
"The deadbolt isn't locked."
Drew frowned as he flipped it to the locked position. "What are these?" Bethany pointed to the sideboard. "Are those your motorcycle keys?"
"They are."
Drew picked up the other two keys sitting there.
"These are copies of the keys to the deadbolt and the doorknob."
Bethany's brow puckered in thought. Who would have copies of your keys?
Molson.
Drew scowled. "Why would he give them back?" asked Bethany. "He's always been free to come and go here."
"He's mad at me." Drew fingered the keys. "Mad enough to give back the keys."
"He is your brother. You need to set this right," Bethany softly told him. "You should have apologized immediately after that remark about kicking him out of our lives."
"I'm still not entirely certain that's not the right move." Drew scowled. "I don't want you in any danger."
"I have a big bad cop to protect me." Bethany patted his chest. "We talked about this. Molson is staying in our lives."
"I'll go by the shop on my way to work," sighed Drew.
He wrapped an arm around her, pulling Bethany to his side.
"Molson will be glad to know that the FBI have decided to open up an investigation into Agent Law, and that the case against Michael will be dismissed today."
"And David will finally go to prison, hopefully for the rest of his life." Bethany leaned against Drew.
"Hopefully."
Drew kissed the crown of her head. "I love you," Bethany whispered.
"Good, because I love you."
Drew checked his watch and decided he could hold his fiancée for a few more minutes before getting ready for the day. An hour later, Drew was looking in confusion at Sammy.
"What do you mean Molson isn't here?"
"He took some time off," Sammy grunted as he wiped grease-stained hands on a greasy rag. "He was sleeping in the back room, but his stuff is gone. I'm not sure when he'll be back."
"Did he say what he was doing, where he was going?"
Drew frowned. One thing he always counted on with his brother was that Molson was punctual and steady about his work attendance.
"Nope."
Sammy put the rag in his back pocket, then grabbed an air hose. "You mind leaving? Some of my customers ain't too comfortable with a cop around."
"Sure thing."
Drew scowled. He conceded the shop was not doing anything illegal. Shady, maybe, but not illegal. Drew had checked many times just to make sure. However, many of the customers did have criminal lives.
"Thanks for your help."
"Any time." Sammy attached a buffing tool to the air hose. Drew decided to go to the house. With Margaret in the hospital, maybe Molson was hanging out there. It was not too far out of the way, and he judged that he had plenty of time to make it to work. Caution tape and a typed notice on the door that the house was condemned by the city greeted Drew. Glowering, Drew tried the door. It wasn't even locked. Vandals could enter any time they wanted. Ducking under the caution tape, Drew pulled out his flashlight as he surveyed the kitchen. An axe lay abandoned on the counter. A couple of doors were off the cabinetry. The door to the cellar was open.
"Molson?"
Moving to the living room, Drew was stunned. There were holes in the walls, the floor, the ceiling. Stuffing from the couch spilled outward. It looked like a war zone, except that someone had laid a blanket on the couch and swept up all the plaster and lath that must have come off the walls. Several attempts at drywalling had been made, making a patchy design. The carpet from the floor was rolled up, standing in a corner of the room. Pieces of plywood had been screwed down to the floor randomly, causing tripping hazards. What had happened here? Drew looked around in wonder at the familiar yet unfamiliar house of his youth.
"Molson!"
He went up the stairs, careful of the sixth step, which was broken. That had been broken since his childhood, as was the picture frame of a rare family photo of all four of them at the top of the stairs. Drew stopped, shining his light down on the broken step. Someone had nailed down a board. Drew carefully tested it, and it held under his weight. He continued to explore the 3 bedrooms. Margot's, Jana's childhood room, and the room he had shared with Molson for years. They were clean, but Margot's room contained more patched walls. A pane of the window had been replaced with wood. A drawer was open on her dresser, clean clothes neatly folded within. Drew remembered that Margot had not been one for doing laundry, which meant that Molson had probably been the one responsible for the drawer's contents. A vacuum stood, lonely, at the end of the hall. Molson's room was obsessively neat and minimalist. He had only a few clothes hanging in the closet. Drew would not have thought that Molson even lived here if it were not for the books on the shelf and the textbook on the nightstand. It was bookmarked, waiting for Molson to return. Drew picked it up, leafing through it. There was a schedule for a practicum at Mercy Hospital. All the textbooks in the room were medical textbooks. Drew frowned. When Molson had said he was doing some schooling, Drew had thought that he might be getting certified as a mechanic. It made sense since Molson worked at an automotive shop. After all these years, Drew wasn't certain he knew his brother at all. In the top drawer of the tall boy was a portfolio. In it was a sheaf of paperwork, some of it graded, some of it grades from tests. His brother was getting near perfect marks. Chemistry, biology, anatomy. Drew was surprised. Molson had never been one to bring back great grades. Then again, he had not applied himself very well. None of the siblings had good marks as kids. He was making a serious effort now. Drew could hardly believe it. His kid brother was trying to become a doctor. Checking his watch, Drew knew that he was going to be late. He pulled out his phone as he went back to his truck. Voicemail. "I got the keys, Molson. I don't want them back." Drew paused. "I'm worried about protecting Bethany. Yet I know that you would never hurt her. When the time comes, just let me know what Tremblay wants. I'll help however I can. Come by the apartment to pick up the keys and we can talk. I'll even let you make the coffee, although that gut rot you gave me an ulcer. Law is going to be investigated and Michael will be let out today. It's all because of you. I know I don't ever say it, but I am proud of you." Drew ended the call. The nationwide search for billionaire David Ramsley continues. The FBI claims the former head of Ramsley Pharmaceuticals was involved in drug smuggling and money laundering. It's believed that he framed his oldest son, Michael Ramsley, for his own crimes. Michael was released from custody yesterday, but there's still no sign of David, who disappeared before FBI could close in on him, making officials wonder if he had been tipped off about his imminent arrest. FBI are satisfied that sons Michael, Maxwell, and Noah Ramsley were not involved in the drug smuggling. However, Ramsley Pharmaceuticals continues to be investigated and is expected to pay a heavy fine, making the company's future uncertain. Robert Ramsley continues to await his pre-trial date, which has now been set for next month. The billionaire tycoon of Ramsley Insurance is accused of being a partner in crime with his brother David. The FBI is still investigating Robert and sons Jake, Everett, and Dylan Ramsley, as well as the insurance company. In other news, Molson shut off his phone, ending the news anchor's monologue. He had ignored his messages for the past few days. He took time off work. He found a room to rent for the month since he was not sure about the legalities of a condemned house. Molson was going to have to find out if he was allowed to get workmen in to repair it, or even if he wanted to, since the property was in Margot's name. Perhaps he would just let it fall down. 3 days without talking to Holly. Going cold turkey on the love of his life sucked. 3 days of doing almost nothing was brain-numbing. Molson was starting to feel itching with the need for something to do. He watched the sun rise over the water. Molson wasn't certain how he had ended up here, on the sand, listening to the waves of the ocean. In the middle of the night, unable to sleep, he had gotten into a cab and come here. People would be getting up soon, and he would have to go before someone called the cops. Molson did not want to get cited for vagrancy or trespassing. It was soothing. The sound of the water, the occasional bird. Maybe, if he ever scraped together enough money, he could find some place to live near the water. It would not have to be big or fancy like the houses behind him. Just something where he could sit on a beach when the mood struck. Like that was ever going to happen. Those sorts of dreams were for other people. Holly had called 5 times. 3 times yesterday. Molson wondered when she would finally stop. Fielding must be ecstatic. Molson tilted his head so the rays of the sun could catch him a little better. It was starting to warm up a little, yet he didn't bother to put down the hood of his sweater. There was a weird comfort in just keeping it up, warm around his ears. Someone jogged past, slowing and then stopping. Molson didn't look at the person. Perhaps if he just ignored him or her, they would go away. Moments later, the person dropped to sit in the sand beside him. Molson heaved an internal sigh as the man got comfortable. He didn't want company, so he ignored him. A black and white dog sniffed around Molson. Molson's experience with dogs were to stay away from them. The people he knew kept the animals for security. This one looked like a pet. It snuffled around with its short nose, peeking occasionally at him from large brown eyes. Molson tentatively reached out a hand, letting the animal sniff it. The man beside him did not say a word. Finally, out of curiosity, Molson turned to look at the companion. He was surprised to see Michael sitting beside him, watching the rising sun. Molson studied him for a moment before looking out over the water. This was his oldest half-sibling. The man he had only ever seen in pictures in the newspaper or on television. He wondered why Michael had chosen to stop his morning jog and sit beside him. Molson hadn't been looking for Michael at all. He knew this stretch of beach was where Michael lived, but Molson had chosen his spot to sit, further away from the Ramsley house. "I didn't mean to put the idea in Pop's head." Molson was surprised to hear the words come out of him. He hadn't meant to say anything, yet the words just popped out without his violation. There was an awkward silence. He sought to clarify what he had just said. "About framing you. It was a totally different conversation, but he just took the idea and set you up. I'm sorry about that." He thought back to the conversation that he and David had on the phone prior to Michael's arrest. The whole thing filled him with remorse. The worst part was David thanking Molson for the idea of framing Michael. Molson had never been more shocked or angered. "You informed on someone else." Molson gritted his teeth. "You threw someone else under the bus." "And I thank you for the idea. It was all you." David gloried in the revelation. "It took me some doing to lay the groundwork in case I was arrested, but it's turned out quite satisfactory. I'm out of jail because of you. Tell me, is he guilty or innocent, the sucker you've put in jail in your place?" Molson demanded. "Once again, thank you, son. I appreciate your contribution to my freedom." Molson felt a hand on his shoulder, shaking him out of his reverie, the mocking words fading in his ears. "You must be glad to be out." Molson was not usually one to try to fill awkward voids of conversation, yet here he was, trying. Michael did not answer, and Molson remembered that he did not speak. Someone had mentioned something about an operation, leaving him unable to voice his thoughts. Molson supposed he should have paid more attention. He looked at Michael to find the man gazing at him with some concern. "It's been a tough week," shrugged Molson. "It's been a good week. You got released, which is a bit bittersweet." Gazing back out at the water, Molson thought the waves were a bit hypnotic. "Did they tell you how Law was planting evidence?" A glance at Michael confirmed that he had been told. He nodded and pointed to Molson. "I didn't do much." Molson downplayed his part. "I was just in the right place at the right time. That little girl, your neighbor Madison, deserves the credit for that." Michael pointed to himself, grabbed one of Molson's hands, giving it a handshake, then pointed to Molson. "You don't need to thank me," Molson repeated uncertainly. At least he thought that was what Michael meant. Michael repeated the gesture firmly. Then he pointed to Molson's neck tattoos. "Worst idea I ever had," grimaced Molson.
Thought it'd be like some Mother Teresa or something."
Michael gave him a questioning look, so Molson explained about his weekly rounds through the gang neighborhoods, where he gave free medical attention, hygienic supplies, and food. Michael pointed at the tear on Molson's face.
"That was me being dumb," explained Molson. "I lost someone. A girl was overdosing. I'd helped her a ton of times before, and we'd become sort of friends. This time, nothing was working. Turns out she'd taken some new stuff that wasn't good at all, being cut with bad cleaners. I brought her to the hospital, and she died shortly after. I drank a little too much that night, stumbled into a tattoo parlor, and the rest is history."
He ran a hand over his face.
"Now people think I killed someone and I belong to gangs every time they look at me. They don't ask questions, they just judge. They don't know that the tats on my neck are each of the 6 main gangs plus an extra special tattoo. All of them combined let me go into each territory to help people. Before, I was harassed by members when I was too deep in some areas. I had to campaign for permission from each gang. I had to explain to them the benefit of keeping their users and poor people in the neighborhoods alive. Now most of the gang members trust me. Sometimes they bring injured people to me. I never did no gang activities, nothing illegal. Yet people think they know all about me. They think I'm some murdering thug with a rap sheet and connections."
Absently, he petted the dog before continuing with a bitter tone.
"I guess I got connections now, not that I wanted him. I owe a favor to a guy named Tremblay. Without him, there would have been no witness to testify that it wasn't you, but David, who did the drops. Tremblay made sure everyone would testify. Now I'm waiting to see what he wants in return. It's exhausting. Everyone dumping on me because they think I'm trash. There ain't much use denying it, 'cause no one listens anyhow. Now it's the truth. Once Tremblay calls in his favor, I'll get sucked in. And it don't end with a simple favor, it never does. Now what everyone thinks of me is true."
Molson took a deep breath.
"I don't know why I'm telling you all this stuff."
Michael tapped his ear.
"Yeah, you're a listener," Molson agreed. "I suppose you won't tell anyone either."
Michael shrugged and nodded with a self-depreciating smile. He rose to his feet, extending a hand down to Molson. After hesitation, Molson took it, letting the older man pull him to his feet. The dog danced around them as Michael led the way up the beach, motioning for Molson to follow.
"You don't want to bring me to your house," insisted Molson. "Did you just hear me? I've now got legit connections to a gang I can't throw off."
Michael sighed loudly, took Molson by the shoulders, and steered him along the beach to his house.
"My own brother and sister want nothing to do with me," Molson tried to explain. "They know if I mess up, the gang could retaliate on them. You got kids, Michael. You don't want to be associated with me. It was a mistake for me to come out here today."
Michael ignored him, pushing him up the stairs and into the house. The dog happily trotted past them to greet a little girl who was coloring at a table. "Hi, Daddy." She wiped her blonde hair out of her eyes. "Who are you?"
"Nobody."
Molson stuck his hands in his pockets, not wanting to touch anything. The house looked too nice. He wished he had taken off his shoes. Somehow his hood had fallen back, and Molson felt a little vulnerable.
"I was never here."
Michael did a series of hand motions. "Daddy says you're one of my uncles," she frowned. "I've never met you before."
"No, you haven't."
Molson looked at Michael in surprise at being labeled an uncle to this girl. Michael gave her a kiss on top of the head before going into the kitchen to feed the dog. "My name's Amy," she piped up, picking up a new crayon. "What's yours?" It would be rude not to answer, Molson told himself.
"My name is Molson."
"Hi, Uncle Molson." Amy smiled at him.
"I should get going."
Molson ignored the twinge in his chest. With Jana banning him from her life, he would never see Jenny, Kara, or Miguel again. He loved his nieces and nephew. Michael shook his head, indicating that he wanted Molson to stay. He came to the living room, pointing at a plaque on the wall. Proverbs 17, verse 17. A friend loveth at all times, and a brother is born for adversity. Michael made a motion with his hand. "Daddy says you're his brother," Amy clarified.
"Are you his interpreter?"
Molson asked her, trying to ignore the emotions that such a simple gesture wrought. He swallowed thickly. Yes, Amy nodded in all seriousness. It's a very important job.
It is, Molson agreed quietly.
Do you want to see the babies? Amy asked him.
The babies?
Molson was confused. My baby sisters, explained Amy. They're sleeping in their crib. If you're really quiet, you can have a look at them. Only if you're quiet, though.
I don't think that's a good idea,
Molson started to say, but Michael was there steering him along again. This time, Amy joined them.
I wasn't expecting an invitation.
Shall I tell Mummy? Asked Amy. At Michael's nod, she ran down the hall ahead of them, the dog following her.
Michael, I appreciate the sentiment of what you're doing.
Molson tried one last time.
You can't want to introduce me to your kids and wife. I gave you a bunch of reasons not to on the beach.
It's Uncle Molson, Mommy. Molson could hear Amy's high-pitched little voice as she told her mother who he was. He braced himself for the look of fear on Anne Ramsley's face when she saw him. No matter what her husband thought, Anne was likely to want him out of the house and away from her children as quickly as possible. Mothers tended to guard their young. He was pushed into a room where a lovely but tired-looking woman looked up at him in surprise. She looked at him assessingly. You are the one who helped Michael get out of prison, she said softly. Coming forward, she gave Molson a hug. Not sure what to do, he carefully patted her shoulder. She drew back, tears in her eyes. Anne went to lean on Michael as she talked to Molson. I want to thank you. Without your efforts to get those men to testify, Michael would still be in prison. He would have been there for the rest of his life. We cannot thank you enough for bringing him home. Michael wrapped his arms around her, rubbing her back as she wiped her eyes. It was easy to see the affection between the couple. Molson had never felt so uncomfortable in his life. Uncomfortable in a good way. People usually were not thanking him. He cleared his throat, shoving his hands in his pockets and hunching his shoulders a little.
I just wanted to make it right.
Any time you need anything, you let us know, Anne insisted. You're invited to all the holidays and birthdays. You and your brother. Did someone say you had a sister?
Yeah, I have a sister,
Molson acknowledged quietly. Not that he was talking to Jana right now. Not sure that he ever would again. Now you have more brothers and sisters, Anne said firmly. You'll have to meet all of us. You are family. He has nieces, too, interrupted Amy. She was standing by the crib, her little hand reaching through the bar to touch one of the baby's feet.
Just how many babies are in there?
Molson rubbed the moisture from his eyes quickly as he turned to the crib. Triplet girls slept peacefully, unconcerned with the noise around them.
All girls?
Aubrey, Emma, and Isabella, Amy announced.
Wow, responded Molson. Those are nice names.
Here. Anne scooped up one of the babies, then turned to him. Support her head.
You don't have to.
Molson swallowed thickly as he carefully held the warm bundle.
Which one is this?
Emma. Anne supplied the answer. She smiled. You are a natural at this. Molson had not had the opportunity to handle a baby this small yet at the hospital. He felt a pain that part of his life was probably over. A hollow feeling settled on him as he realized without Holly he probably never would have kids. He didn't want to be in a relationship with anyone else. What's the matter? Anne asked softly.
I just think both of you are really blessed, Molson replied thickly.
We've had some really tough times, Anne responded as she picked up a baby. However, we are blessed. Never would I have imagined our life would be like this. Michael raised an eyebrow at Molson, knowing that he was not telling him everything.
Okay.
Molson muttered a confession. He didn't know what it was about Michael, but the man had him blabbing all sorts of things he would never tell anyone else.
I was thinking about Holly and how I'm probably not going to have a nice little family like this.
Why wouldn't you? Anne softly cried. Who is Holly?
She's special. Too special for me.
Molson sighed as he gently snuggled the baby against him. You righted an injustice, responded Anne. No one is too special for you. So what is the real problem?
First, her dad hates my guts, admitted Molson. Second, to get those men to testify, I now owe a serious gang leader favor. That's not exactly Boy Scout stuff. I don't want to put her in any danger if I mess up whatever Tremblay asks me to do.
You're not going to mess it up. She put a hand on his arm, expertly shifting the baby she held. You have all of us to help you. Michael and I mean it when we say that if you need anything, all you have to do is ask. Michael carefully plucked the baby out of Anne's arm, smiling down at her.
What's the dog's name?
Molson asked to distract them, not wanting to talk about Holly anymore. It hurt too much. FedEx, Amy answered.
FedEx?
Molson was a little confused. Daddy named her FedEx. He carried her through the rain like a package when he found her because she had a sore paw, Amy told the story. Daddy told me in pictures. He draws really well. Someday I'm going to draw like Daddy.
That's an original name, Molson commented.
He breathed in sweet baby smell.
How do you manage 3 at one time?
Anne smiled tiredly. I have some help come in every day. Between my sister-in-laws, mother-in-law, friends, and now Michael, we manage. There was a noise from downstairs. Molson stilled.
Is someone else in the house?
That's Fen Lee, our housekeeper, Anne told him. You are staying for breakfast.
Thank you, but you don't need to have me stay,
Molson hastily said.
I didn't expect anyone to invite me. I suppose you'll want to spend time together as a family. I'm not really hungry anyways.
A growl from his stomach belied his statement. You are staying, repeated Anne. Fen Lee would give us a large amount of grief if you didn't. No one wants to be in trouble with Fen Lee, Amy told him with a serious expression on her little face. If you enjoyed this chapter of Unlikely Hero, Book 7 of the Ramsley Brothers series, look for Chapter 10. Please consider sharing this video or hitting the like button. These are easy things for you to do and help me with the algorithms. Thank you and happy listening.